500,000 lines of code, gone. Exposed to the entire internet in a single packaging mistake. On March 31st, 2026, Anthropic, one of the most secretive and well-funded AI companies on the planet, accidentally shipped the entire client-side source code of Claude Code to anyone who downloaded version 2.1.88 from NPM. And here is the wild part. It was not a hack. Nobody broke in. They did it to themselves. This is not a story about some dusty internal document slipping out. This is 512,000 lines of code across nearly 1,900 files, containing the internal architecture of one of the most advanced AI coding tools in the world. And by the time Anthropic realized what had happened, it was already too late. The internet had it. And now, so do you. Before we go any further, there is something buried inside this leak that almost nobody is talking about. A secret agent, a virtual pet, and a system called Undercover mode that was specifically designed to make sure none of this ever got out. We are going to get to all of it. But first, you need to understand how something like this even happens. When developers ship software, they often work with something called source maps. Think of source maps like the original handwritten recipe behind a packaged meal. The product you buy in a store is compressed, simplified, made for the shelf. But the source map is the full kitchen notes. Every step, every ingredient, every note the chef wrote to themselves. Normally, you strip those out before you ship. You never, ever include the recipe with the product. On March 31st, Anthropic forgot to strip them. One mispackaged NPM release and 5/12 lines of their internal TypeScript code was sitting inside a public download that anyone in the world could grab. Within hours, developers started noticing. By the end of the day, the archived code was on public GitHub repositories with tens of thousands of stars. And once something hits GitHub like that, it does not disappear. Ever. Now here's the first big thing you need to understand. This leak did not expose your conversations with Claude. It did not expose model weights or any of the actual AI. What it exposed was the machinery around the AI. How Claude Code thinks, plans, uses tools, manages memory, and coordinates tasks. That is actually more interesting than people realize, and here is why. When you use Claude Code, you are not just sending messages to a model and getting answers back. There is an entire orchestration system running underneath. The leaked code shows a multi-agent workflow engine, a system where Claude does not just respond, it plans. It calls tools. It edits files. It manages context across sessions using something the internal documents call Kairos and Autodream memory systems. These are not features Anthropic announced. These are systems you were never supposed to know existed. The leak also revealed 43 built-in tools, 26 hidden commands that normal users never see, 44 feature flags controlling experimental modes, and over 120 secret environment variables. To put that in plain terms, there is an entire hidden layer of Claude Code sitting underneath the surface, full of debug tools, telemetry systems, and internal commands that Anthropic uses but never ship to you publicly. And now anyone can see exactly what those are. Here is where it gets genuinely surprising. Buried inside the code is something called Buddy. Not a feature, not a tool. A Tamagotchi-style virtual pet agent that runs alongside Claude Code. It appears to be designed for onboarding or keeping users engaged, like a digital companion that lives inside your coding assistant. Nobody outside Anthropic knew this existed. The fact that it is in the code base suggests it was either in active testing or planned for a future release. Either way, it is one of those details that makes you realize how much is happening behind the scenes of these tools that you interact with every day. And then there are the code names: Capybara, Fennec, Numbat. These are internal names for Claude models, and the leak maps them directly to upcoming versions. Anthropic's roadmap, the thing they guard more carefully than almost anything, was sitting right there in the source code for anyone to read. Now, remember that thing I mentioned called Undercover mode? Here is where the irony gets almost painful. Anthropic built a system specifically to prevent exactly this kind of leak. Undercover mode is a set of model instructions that tells Claude never to mention internal animal code names like capybara or tengu in public commits, never to reference internal Slack channels, never to surface anything that looks like internal infrastructure. The whole point was to make sure none of this got out, and then a packaging mistake dumped all of it onto the internet anyway. The safeguard worked perfectly inside the model. The safeguard completely missed the NPM release pipeline. That is the kind of detail that keeps security engineers awake at night. But the security story gets more serious than just embarrassing code names. And before Anthropic pulled it, there are reports that malicious code was injected into the distribution chain. This is what security researchers call a supply chain attack. If you downloaded that version and ran it, you were not just using a buggy package. You may have been running code that someone else modified. Developers who were using Claude Code during that window were told to immediately roll back to a safe version, rotate any API keys or credentials that might have been exposed, and audit any dependencies that touch that release. If you are a developer and you have not done that yet, do it today. Now let me be straight with you about something, because not every video is going to say this clearly. The leak did not expose your private conversations. It did not expose Anthropic's model weights, which is where the real competitive intelligence lives. What was exposed is the client-side code, the front end, the tooling, the scaffolding. Anthropic can rebuild trust around this. They can change code names. They can rotate environment variables. The core of what makes Claude powerful is not in this leak. But here's the honest part. That does not mean this is nothing. The agent architecture, the tool designs, the memory systems, the workflow engine, that is years of engineering decisions made visible in one afternoon. Competitors can look at this and skip enormous amounts of trial and error. They now have a detailed blueprint for how one of the best AI coding assistants in the world actually works under the hood. In one packaging mistake, Anthropic may have handed the entire AI industry a head start on building Claude-style agents. You cannot unlearn something you have already read. Step back for a second and think about what this moment actually means. Most people interact with AI tools the same way they interact with a microwave. You press a button, something happens, you do not think about what is inside. This leak is the first time the public has seen inside one of these systems at this level of detail. Not a research paper, not a press release, not a carefully curated demo. The actual source code, the real internal names, the hidden commands, the memory systems, the virtual pet. This is what these tools actually look like when the marketing layer comes off, and what it shows is that the gap between what these companies tell you their tools do and what the tools actually do is enormous. Not in a sinister way, in a scale of complexity way. Claude Code is not just a chatbot that writes code. It is a multi-agent system with memory, planning, tool orchestration, and experimental features running in the background that most users will never see or know about. The version of this tool you are using is the tip of the iceberg. The leaked code is the iceberg. That changes how you should think about these tools going forward. When a company says their AI assistant is simple and easy to use, they are describing the surface. Underneath, there are hundreds of thousands of lines of engineering decisions, feature flags, and experimental systems. And apparently, sometimes those systems end up in a public NPM package by accident. Here's a question worth leaving in the comments. What is the one AI tool you genuinely could not give up right now? And do you think you actually know how it works? I am curious what people say, because after going through this story, I am not sure any of us knew as much as we thought we did. If you want to go deeper on how AI companies actually build these agent systems, not the leaked version, but the principles behind them, the video right after this one breaks down exactly how multi-agent AI works in plain language. It is worth watching back to back with this one. 500,000 lines. One packaging mistake. And suddenly, the thing everyone thought was a black box is sitting open on GitHub with 80,000 stars. The recipe was always there. Now the whole internet has it.